He was the golden face of classic Hollywood, a man whose quiet charm and piercing blue eyes defined an era. Robert Redford, the Sundance Kid, the Oscar-winning director, the visionary who built a sanctuary for independent voices in American cinema. On screen, he seemed untouchable, a symbol of beauty, talent, and success that stretched across 6 decades. But away from the lights, his story was not one of perfection. It was one of loss. As a teenager, he buried his mother, the person who believed in him more than anyone else. As a young father, he cradled a son who lived only 10 weeks. Decades later, he would stand by another son's hospital bed, only to lose him too to a relentless illness. And in between, a marriage of 27 years dissolved quietly, leaving behind letters he wrote that were never answered. This is not the tale of a flawless star. It is the story of a man who carried grief like a shadow, even as he built a legacy that changed film forever. At nearly 90, Robert Redford remains a legend. Yet his true strength lies not in fame, but in the way he turned unbearable pain into art, resilience, and silence more powerful than words. Robert Redford was born in 1936 in Santa Monica, California, into a modest working-class family still living in the shadow of the Great Depression. His father was steady but reserved, an accountant who believed in discipline. His mother, Martha, was gentle and full of hope, the one who whispered to her son that he was destined for something greater. Yet Redford's childhood was marked not by safety, but by loss. At just 8 years old, his uncle David, a hero in his eyes, was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. To Robert, it was a shattering introduction to the reality of death. 3 years later, he faced his own body's betrayal. At 11, he awoke paralyzed, his eyelids heavy, his muscles frozen. Doctors called it polio. For 2 weeks, he lay motionless, listening to his own breath and wondering if he would ever run, draw, or play again. The greatest wound came at 18. His mother, only 40, died from complications after childbirth. She had been his anchor, the one who believed when he did not. Losing her left him with silence, a silence his family never broke, for grief was rarely spoken of. From that silence, Redford forged a resilience that would shape every performance, every glance, every role that came after. By the time Robert Redford entered young adulthood, he was a restless soul searching for purpose. He had once seemed destined for sports, earning a baseball scholarship to the University of Colorado. But the lure of rebellion proved stronger. Nights of drinking, racing cars, and living recklessly soon cost him his scholarship and his direction. At 19, he was a dropout with no map forward. Yet in failure, a new path opened. Redford left America for Europe, where he lived like a vagabond artist. In Florence, he studied painting. In Paris, he survived on scraps of bread, sketching in cafes, breathing in the world of art and freedom. Those years of poverty gave him something his privileged peers could never buy: the belief that survival itself was an act of creativity. When he returned to New York, he carried with him that fire. At the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, he discovered that acting could channel the grief and silence of his youth into expression. Soon after, Broadway embraced him in Barefoot in the Park, where his wit and authenticity drew full houses. And then Hollywood called. By the mid-1960s, with Inside Daisy Clover and later Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Redford transformed from a struggling painter into an icon whose face defined a generation. For most actors, fame on screen would have been enough, but Robert Redford was never content with simply being admired. At the height of his stardom, he stepped behind the camera, a risk that many believed would end in failure. Instead, his very first film as a director, Ordinary People, 1980, stunned the world. A quiet story about a family unraveling after tragedy, It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Redford had proven he was more than a handsome face. He was a storyteller with the courage to confront grief and silence. His films as a director continued to echo his own life. A river runs through it, where nature became a metaphor for memory and loss. Quiz Show, a meditation on corruption and morality. The Horse Whisperer, a tale of healing after trauma. Each project was less about spectacle and more about humanity. And then came his greatest gift to cinema, Sundance. In 1981, he founded the Sundance Institute in the quiet mountains of Utah, creating a sanctuary for independent voices. From there, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, and Chloe Zhao emerged. Sundance was not only a festival, it was a revolution. Redford had built more than a career. He had built a movement. Behind the applause and golden screens, Robert Redford carried private wounds that shaped his entire life. In 1958, barely in his 20s and unknown, he married Lola Van Wagenen. Their union was built on faith and hope, but tragedy arrived quickly. Their first son, Scott, died suddenly at just 10 weeks old. Redford later confessed that the loss left a scar he could never heal, a question that haunted him forever. Was there something I could have done? Though the couple went on to raise 3 more children, sorrow returned. In 1983, their daughter Shauna's partner was murdered in a still unsolved case. Their second son, James, battled a rare liver disease that led to 2 transplants, and decades later, liver cancer. In 2020, James died at 58. For Redford, losing a child for the second time was devastation beyond words. After 27 years of marriage, Redford and Lola quietly divorced. Outwardly, he called it a right decision. In truth, it left him broken. He wrote letters to her that were never answered, admitting later that she had been the true anchor of his life. Only years later, with Sibeli Sagars, an environmental artist who saw him simply as a man, not a legend, did Redford find the peace he had searched for since youth. Robert Redford's legacy is not measured in box office numbers or the brightness of his name on a marquee. It is measured in the way he turned silence into language, pain into performance, and private grief into stories that spoke to millions. On screen, he gave us characters who were strong yet vulnerable, men whose glances carried the weight of unspoken sorrow. As a director, he revealed the cracks within families, the corruption of institutions, the quiet resilience of ordinary people. Through Sundance, he changed the very shape of American cinema. By giving a stage to those without power, he proved that truth and daring voices could move the world as much as spectacle. Independent films that might never have been seen found life because of him, reshaping what audiences believed cinema could be. Beyond the screen, he used his influence to fight for nature, lending his voice to protect wild lands and warn against climate change. To him, an artist's duty was not just to entertain, but to defend what matters most. Now, at nearly 90, Redford chooses peace over spotlight. He paints, he walks the land he loves, and he sits quietly beside his wife. And yet the question lingers, is Robert Redford only a star, or is he something greater? A reminder that even the deepest tragedies can be transformed into timeless light. If Robert Redford has ever touched your heart, through a role, a glance, or his legacy, hit like to honor him. Share your thoughts in the comments. Is he an actor, a director, or a cultural revolutionary? And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories behind Hollywood's legends.